Okay, we're going live now from two forms of media. We have our YouTube page up and running. We also have our Instagram going. So first, the good news, and then the potentially upsetting news. First, the good news. Today is the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, which is actually the day that I made my consecration to the Blessed Mother 6 years ago. And I know a lot of other people did the consecration. My brother Jeff, also many people renew their consecration on this date, as well as and my friends Mark. A lot of people's consecration day today, and the brown scapular, one of the gifts from heaven right here. Everyone in the world should be wearing this brown scapular. It's so important because the Blessed Mother promised that whoever dies wearing the brown scapular will not see the fires of hell. So the Blessed Mother appeared at Mount Carmel back in the 13th century and said, wear the brown scapular as a sign of salvation. Actually, I have a real good book about this, the externals of the Catholic Church. You see, it's a reprint. These old books, in fact, a lot of times they're not published anymore. But you know me, I'm a big fan of Restore 1954. So get old Catholic books that were written ideally before 1960, before the corruption in the church really took hold. Not that there wasn't corruption in the church before. So wear the brown scapular. I made a great video on this. If you die wearing the scapular, you won't see the fires of hell. In fact, the priest said in a homily last week at Mass that someone always wore the scapular. One of the parishioners always wore the brown scapular, and they took it off because they had something they had to do. They had a heart attack and dropped dead without the scapular on. Well, they were able to revive him. He woke, he woke up, he came back to life. They put the scapular on him and then he died. This happened recently, either out on Long Island. I think it was out on Long Island or maybe New Jersey. But the point is, we're so similar, Long Island, New Jersey, right? Me and my wife. But the point is, he died wearing the brown scapular. It was a grace that was given. Also, we need to know that from this book, interestingly, another promise, the Sabbatine Privilege, which is that, let me read this one for you. The Blessed Mother assured Pope John the 22nd that any wearer of the scapular who shall have complied regularly with certain conditions will be released promptly from purgatory, especially on the first Saturday after their death. So this was a privilege. The Blessed Mother promised that if you die wearing the scapular, if you observe chastity according to your state of life, because chastity isn't just for priests, that's celibacy, but even within marriage, and as a single person, we all have to observe chastity, and you pray the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary every day. Now, a priest can dispense you of that and allow you to say the rosary or do some kind of work of penance in place of the little office of the Blessed Virgin. But if you do that, observe chastity according to your state of life, wear the brown scapular, as well as pray the little office or the rosary every day, that on the Saturday after your death, the Blessed Mother would go into purgatory and scoop you out. I mean, how motherly is that, right? The Saturday after your death. That's why Fulton Sheen would often pray that he would die on a Saturday. I didn't look it up yet if he did die on a Saturday, but the point is, wear the brown scapular. Next, Pope Pius X allowed a dispensation that you could wear the scapular medal, to contain any one of the scapulars. So if you wear a red scapular, if you were enrolled in the blue scapular, the black scapular, everything, there was a period of time where people were wearing 5, 10 scapulars. Pope Pius X said in 1907, and this is according to the book, The Externals of the Catholic Church. Like I said, pre-1960 Catholic books, you got to get them. He said that by regulation made by Pope Pius X in 1910, it is permitted to wear a medal instead of one or more of the small scapulars. So this medal can replace any or all of them. That is, all persons who have been validly invested with a blessed woolen scapular may use the scapular instead. If the medal is to be used instead of several scapulars, a blessing must be given to it for each scapular which it is intended to replace. For each blessing, the church requires merely the sign of the cross. So that's the good news. Happy Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Make sure you wear that brown scapular and spread that devotion. That and the miraculous medal are critical. Every Catholic should be wearing the miraculous medal and the brown scapular. That's why they have 5-way pendants, and that's why we created this cross of amazing grace. More on that another time, that contains both the scapular medal as well as the brown scapular. Now, the potentially upsetting news. Yet another time bomb was dropped on the church by Pope Francis on a Marian feast day. We know the Pachamama was released on October 13th. That whole debauchery happened on the feast day of Our Lady, well, on the October 13th, the last day, the miracle of the sun. And now we see yet another terrible thing that has happened. We have a motu proprio by Pope Francis called Traditionis Custodes, and that was issued motu proprio, or maybe more appropriately, motu improprio. So that's where we're at right now. So here's some of the highlights right here. So first of all, the first thing he says is guardians of tradition, the bishops in communion with the Bishop of Rome. Yes, they are the guardians of tradition. Technically, have they been acting that way? Overall, no. There are good bishops out there. There are good cardinals. There are people who are more solid on tradition. And of course, there's a spectrum. You never want to just pigeonhole people into a category. But, you know, guardians of tradition, it's a tall statement right there. So some of the highlights of Traditionis Custodes is the Pope feels the need to intervene because he believes the traditional Latin Mass is encouraging disagreements that injure the church. Okay, so here's some of the things it says. So first of all, this is in many ways, well, not many ways, it is overturning Pope Benedict's motu proprio Summorum Pontificum back in 2007. And one of the things he said there is that the traditional Latin Mass was never abrogated. It's always to be honored, and you don't need the bishop's approval to say the Latin Mass. Any priest can say the traditional Latin Mass. Well, that's all been abrogated now, or abrogated quotation marks, as if you could actually do that to the Mass of all time. Well, now in the institutional church, the priest has to get, so what has to happen is you have to get the bishop's approval. First of all, any priest who wants to say the traditional Latin Mass, they must now seek approval from the bishop. They have to submit a form. So that would go for my brother, several other priests. They have to ask permission of the bishop in order to say the Mass that is our birthright, which is crazy. But here's some other highlights of the document. Bishops are to decide if having the traditional Latin Mass is beneficial for the laity or not. So now the bishops, they make the decision. We're leaving it in the hands of the current bishops, the ones who stood by while all of our churches were shut down. And I don't want to come across harsh here, because Jesus taught us we have to be innocent as doves, wise as serpents. There's many extenuating circumstances. We have to give these people the benefit of the doubt. Many of these bishops were educated post 1960, after the coming out party of the Freemasons at the Second Vatican Council. So they were hoodwinked too with the false. They were brainwashed with false theology of what the church is and what it's not in many ways. So we do want to be careful. We're not slinging stones at people, but innocent as doves, wise as serpents. You're going to see a lot of that in this video. So now the bishops have to decide if the traditional Latin Mass is beneficial for the laity or not, and decide to keep it or get rid of it in the diocese. Now it's the bishop's control. And basically, I have to go back to Vatican II, Sacrosanctum Concilium in 22.2, where that's where the Pope officially gave the authority to the local ordinary for any adaptations or experimentations that could happen in the Mass. You want to look up in Vatican II, the document is Sacrosanctum Concilium, the document on the liturgy, 22.2. That is the spot where the Pope conceded power to the bishops as regard to the Mass, which never happened in the history of the church, unprecedented. So that's where you want to look there. So now, again, thanks to the flattening out of the church, this collegiality, this French Revolution principle of equality, liberty, and fraternity. Unfortunately, the qualities our country, the United States, was founded on, this liberalism, naturally that started taking root in the church. So now the bishops are getting to choose whether or not this is helpful to their diocese, as if the Mass of all time, the traditional Latin Mass, could ever be a detriment to the faithful, which is crazy. So bishops are also not allowed to, they can't allow any new group to be established. So the Fraternal Society of St. Peter, the FSSP, Institute of Christ the King, as tradition is growing and getting stronger and stronger, you would think there would be more groups, more religious orders that want to build tradition and the traditional Latin Mass into their charism. Well, that's all been halted. No new groups are allowed to start in regards to tradition. So remember, the church, the church that's always been given so much outreach to the Orthodox, the Protestants, different religions. When I read this, it feels like the church, the Pope, the leaders in the church are cracking down and really dropping the hammer on tradition with all open arms to everyone else. The Orthodox, the Protestants, the different faiths, the pagans, Jews, Muslims, bringing everyone in. That Abrahamic covenant, or Abrahamic house in Abu Dhabi, where it's going to be a Jewish synagogue, a mosque for Muslims, and a Christian church, non-denominational Christian church, as if that could really be called Christian. That's all allowed, embraced with open arms. And now you talk about the traditional Latin Mass, and the full weight of Rome comes crashing down. And all of a sudden, an establishment and religious leaders, Catholic leaders, the Pope, who's so known to be so inclusive, bring everyone in, and the weight fully comes down on the Latin Mass. Again, innocent as doves, wise as serpents. We have to see this for what it is. This is much worse than expected, this motu proprio. Okay, so any priests, as I said before, ordained after today who want to say the traditional Latin Mass need to submit a request to the bishop, who will then consult with the Vatican. We'll talk about what that means in a second. Priests who already say the traditional Latin Mass need to request authorization to continue. So what does that sound like to me? That sounds to me a lot like the time before Jesus's birth, where everyone needed to be enrolled. Caesar Augustus wanted the entire world to be enrolled. And we know what happens after the people are counted, the slaughter of the holy innocents. So that's what it kind of sounds like. It almost sounds like, and don't quote me on this, this is, just thoughts. Hopefully this doesn't come true, but after you have the counting of the people, then there's a slaughtering of the innocents. As the head goes, so does the body. So we saw this with Christ. Now we may be seeing this with the priest. What I get the sense of, and again, I don't know the future, but it sounds like now all the bishops are going to have a head count of all the priests that are amenable to tradition, that like to say the traditional Latin Mass. All the bishops now have this list of all the priests who are more traditional. And guess what? At any point in time, now that's kind of like a strike against them, where their name pops up on the list, and all of a sudden it's warning, this is a traditional friendly priest. So now what happens is they could always, once they have you counted, then they could control you. So again, I hope that's not the case, and I know every bishop's different, so we want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm just saying, be aware of it. Now it's going to be on record. Before, it didn't have to be on record because the bishop did not need to approve of this. But now it's going to be on the record. Every priest that wants to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass, the Pope's going to know who it is. The bishops are going to know who it is. And now that the people are rounded up, the priests are rounded up. It's a communist tactic where now they could much easier get rid of those priests. Again, I hope this doesn't come true, but we just have to be aware of it. We have to understand the implications. And this is an opportunity, I think, for the SSPX to absolutely explode. I mean, what's going to happen if the Pope demands certain things? And the SSPX is a totally different, it's a different topic here a little bit, but what's going to happen if now the bishop, the local bishop says that no, these priests are not allowed to serve the Latin Mass, and this is all they were serving, like let's say an FSSP or Institute of Christ the King. Well, if that local bishop says no, what you're going to see is some of those bishops now going into the diocese and celebrating the Novus Ordo Mass. Others will probably defect to the SSPX during this time of emergency. So this might be one of the greatest things, where the beginning, maybe not the beginning, but a marker that helps the SSPX absolutely explode, which would be huge. That is, like I said, it's a separate issue, because in order for a priest to defect to the SSPX, and really we shouldn't use the word to defect, because we're not the ones defecting here. We're maintaining the Catholic faith, the Mass of all time, the tradition of all time, the Catholic Church of all time. We're staying faithful to eternal Rome. That's what the SSPX, Archbishop Lefebvre and the 4 bishops, what they wanted to do is stay faithful to authentic Rome, to the Church of all time, the magisterium of all time. So once priests understand that, and once they do more reading, and I get it, priests are busy. You're dispensing the sacraments, your marriage counseling, you're traveling around, you're doing a lot of pastoral work, marriage prep, and all of this. It's hard for a lot of priests to study the history of the Society of St. Pius X. It's just easier to say, you know what, they were excommunicated, they're a renegade group, push them to the side, as opposed to actually putting in the academic rigor, the scholarship. Why were they excommunicated? Why are they in schism? So I think once more priests study that, they're going to see that, hey, this is a very good thing. And if we don't want to be controlled by the institutional leaders, that we're in a state of emergency. We've been in a state of emergency since Vatican II. And definitely after that, where clearly the weight of Rome was against the traditional Latin Mass and against traditional minded people, that the magisterium now has a sense. Look what Pope Francis here says, that the Catholics who attend the traditional Latin Mass can't deny Vatican II. Now I get it, there are some very good things in Vatican II, but as a whole, if you look at it in its totality, there's many ambiguities. And what a lot of times they'll say is, well, tradition in light of the council and the council in light of tradition, that whole hermeneutic of continuity. Well, there's phrases, there's statements made inside the council that are directly contradictory to the Catholic faith, that Orthodox can receive our sacraments and we can receive their sacraments under any circumstances. Orientalium Ecclesiarum number 27 in Vatican II, that's a break from tradition. That's not a development of doctrine. That's a break. That people, Protestants or Orthodox, who deny Catholic teachings, that promulgate heresy, can be considered in the church and having a lesser degree of communion. This whole concept, the branch theory, different degrees of communion, that's not a development. That's a break from tradition. That never was it held by anyone in the Catholic Church. Go read the old documents where they actually said that anyone who holds a heretical belief is in the Church of Christ. If you're correct, if you have a heretical belief and you're corrected and you say, no, I still hold that heretical belief, you're not in the church anymore. Not because the church is trying to be the bad guys or the Pope or the bishops are trying to be the bad guys, but because of the fact you've put yourself outside of the church. Communion, being in communion, it's an all or nothing proposition. There's no partial degrees of communion. And never take my word for this. Go back to the traditional teachings of the church. Like I said, read books before 1960, especially the great papal encyclicals from roughly 1832 with Mirari Vos with Pope Gregory XV to 1950, Pope Pius XII, Humani Generis. I think those are the years, or close to those years anyway. Those great papal encyclicals that dropped the hammer on liberalism, socialism, communism, Freemasonry, and all the evils we're seeing right now. Again, innocent as doves, wise as serpents. A lot of these priests and bishops, and even the Pope himself, give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they didn't study those great papal encyclicals. We have to keep it in our mind. Maybe they did also. Like maybe there are nefarious motives, but maybe they didn't study these things. We don't have a choice. We have to study these papal encyclicals, read the Roman Catechism. Remember, do teachings develop? Can tradition develop over time? Yes. But the development of doctrine is never totally contrary to the premise. So you never have, this is a teaching of the church, and now it develops to be the opposite. God cannot contradict himself. So when you see an opposite teaching, you know that's not from God. Giving them the benefit of the doubt, we don't know why that's the case. What are these people motives? Don't ask me. I don't know Pope Francis' motives. I don't know the motives of the bishops. That's not my job. So don't ask me. We're just reporting the news here, and we're trying to report on Catholic tradition. So again, you look at those breaks from tradition that are in the Second Vatican Council, and we cannot accept those teachings that are in Vatican II. Can we accept the teachings that are in line with tradition? Yes, of course. What should be done with the Second Vatican Council? That'll be for another pope to decide. That's above my pay grade. My recommendation would be to throw the whole thing out, because there's a lot of popes that built on top of that led to a lot of errors. That's not my call. What I will say is obey the teachings that are in that document, that are in line with the Catholic faith. Anything that's ambiguous, that's a red flag. Go with the traditional teachings, and anything that's contrary to the church, like I said about the Orthodox being able to receive our sacraments, us being able to receive their sacraments, that's not true. We can't pray with non-believers. If you're not Catholic, we can't pray with you. That's the constant teaching of the church. It's not us holding a grudge against Protestants or Orthodox or Jews or Muslims. No, that's just the teachings of the church. We're not allowed to pray with Catholics, can only pray with Catholics because you're uniting your prayer with them, communicatio in sacris. It's not pleasing to God. That is a break. I think that was an Unitatis Redentagratio, the document of Vatican II. So those we deny outright, but a categorical approval of Vatican II, we can't do. We have to just accept the teachings that are in line with tradition. And also an interesting thing they said in the Pope's Motu Inapproprio was that readings are to be proclaimed in the vernacular. A lot of times they do this at the traditional Latin Mass. I've been going to the traditional Latin Mass almost exclusively for the past 2 years. And they almost always do the reading. Well, they do the reading originally in Latin, and then from the pulpit before the homily, they'll often say the reading in English. That even includes at Society of St. Pius X masses that I've been to. They'll say the reading in English frequently, not always. But I guess now to mandate it, here's where it gets difficult, where now they're starting to mandate that this has to happen. So innocent as doves, wise as serpents. I'm seeing a big time crackdown. The lines are being drawn. The lines are being drawn. It seems like the hierarchy in the church, the institutional church, is trying to see which priests are traditional minded and which ones are not. And because of the fact that they're strong arming this process so much, abrogating the Motu Inapproprio by Pope Benedict, which was at least a material win for traditional, it really wasn't a formal win. That document in and of itself was not necessarily a big win for tradition, even though it seems like it was. We go into that in a moment. But it seems like there's a lot of control here being exerted, and they're going to know who are the friendliest to tradition, and now we can control those priests. So I see a lot of priests, especially if they start reading into the Society of St. Pius X. I see a lot of the priests will wind up just going the diocesan model. Many priests will, I don't want to use the word defect, but will go to the Society of St. Pius X, which I think would be absolutely huge for the Catholic Church. It would be a great thing because they're trying to protect the faith. Of course, they're accepting the Pope, they're accepting the bishops. You have to be Catholic. But when it comes to teachings that are contrary to the Catholic Church, you can't obey. That's just what it is. This is what's always been taught. Let me give you a few quotes here. In fact, that if the Pope or bishops are giving teachings that are not in line with Catholic tradition, you can't obey. Remember, obedience is not good in and of itself. Obedience is a virtue, which means there's a golden mean. Okay, that means you could sin by defect, by not having enough obedience. You could sin, we know that's bad, but you could also sin by excess, having too much obedience. And that's what we see. What Pope Innocent III once said is that it's quite conceivable that a future Pope may teach heresy and put himself outside the church, in which case we must not follow him. Now, I didn't just say right now that Pope Francis taught heresy. That's not what I said here. I'm just saying that Pope Innocent III said that if a Pope teaches heresy, you don't follow him. If a council teaches heresy, you don't follow it. You don't follow that specific teaching. You don't just reject the papacy wholesale and all the authority of the bishops. That's crazy. That's not what we're saying. Pope Pius IX said that if a Pope teaches error, you don't listen to him. Pope Leo XIII in Rerum Novarum said, laws only bind when they are in accordance with right reason. And that's what I would say is more appropriate to this document that we see with Pope Francis, that if it's not in line with reason, it's not binding. So a priest can always say the Latin Mass because this is your birthright as a priest. This is our birthright as Catholics to be able to hear our rite, the Latin rite, the Mass of all time. That can't be restricted by the church. So I don't want to see the priest get sucked into this where now if the hammer, okay, so my recommendation, of course, do what they say, even if it's a trap, you do what the church says. You tell them, you submit your request to celebrate the Latin Mass. But if the weight keeps dropping down on you and you can't celebrate the Latin Mass, I mean, God forgive me, I would do it anyway. We can't, I mean, that can't be suppressed. That's not in line with the church teachings. That's not what Jesus Christ wants. I mean, the new Mass, the Novus Ordo Mass, is harmful to the faithful. It's a Protestantized liturgy. It was made by 6 Protestants, and Bugnini, who could very quite possibly have been a Freemason. I've heard both sides of it, but if you act as a Freemason, if it walks like a duck, acts like a duck, for all intents and purposes, it is a duck. So you can't force someone to do something that's harmful to the faith. I really believe, and I'm not the only Catholic who believes this, that the Novus Ordo is harmful to the faith. It's harmful to the believers. I don't want my children exposed to that. They can't mandate, the hierarchy cannot mandate that. That is a law that is not binding because it's not in accordance with right reason. So again, innocent as doves, wise as serpents. I try to be as balanced as I possibly can here, giving the people the benefit of the doubt, giving the hierarchy the benefit of the doubt. They haven't, maybe they haven't been catechized properly, but we do have to be wise as serpents. And this was a major blow to tradition. We have to know the teachings of the faith. Nowadays, everyone needs to study on their own. Our Lady will get us through this. She's gotten us through other things before. Pray for the consecration of Russia. Pray for the 5th Marian dogma. The more the Blessed Mother is honored, the more she'll help out the church. Pray in a special way to Our Lady of Mount Carmel on today's feast. And we just keep doing the best we can. It's not easy, but we are resurrection people. We're people of hope. We can't rely on the hierarchy to teach us what the church tradition is. We have to know what the tradition is on our own. So start reading pre-1960 books, and that's all we could do. So we'll give you an update once we know more about what the story is, but not a great start to Our Lady of Mount Carmel today, to say the very least. But like I said, this could be a big time blessing in disguise as the lines get clearer and clearer. I think it'll be much more clear over time that the Society of St. Pius X